Reading Empire of the Vampire before I read this series had me wondering if, maybe the violence wasn't going to be as much as there was in Empire of the Vampire. Well, Jay Kristoff says, when all is blood, blood is all. Hey, what's up, bookworms and initiates? Mike back today to talk a little more Jay Kristoff for the second time on the show. Well, third if you count the interview. But this time we're going to be dipping into 2016. This is Nevernight. This is God's Grave. And this is Dark Dawn. Ending in 2019, this is the Nevernight Trilogy, guys. And yes, that one spine not matching not only bothered me, it bothered Jay Kristoff as well. But this series, guys, has been a kind of a long time coming for me. It was a series that really first got on my radar when Dark Dawn released in 2019. I was like, why have I not heard of this guy? This is like blowing up everywhere. And I think it is that he was he was an author. He wasn't hurting. He was doing okay, but I think that this series really breaking out big is really what made him like a household name in the fantasy community. But I had kind of put it off for a while because it seemed like so many people whose opinions that I value, they could be completely, polar opposites of one another. One person would love it, another person would hate it, and I just kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to be in a rush to get to it. I'll get to it when I can, and I'll make up my own mind like I always do. Then I read Empire of the Vampire in, last November, and I really, really liked it. And after I talked to Jay, I said, you know what, I want to give this a try. And with this new schedule I got going on, guys, where I don't have quite as many commitments as before, I can throw something like a whole trilogy on my schedule, and it works out. And I'm glad that it did, because, guys, I'm telling you up front, I had a really good time with this, and we're going to kind of get into why. But, after Empire of the Vampire, it was very, very high expectations for me. So did it meet them? Well, we're going to talk about it, guys. We're going to begin, like usual, with talking about what is this series about. Now, in a land where three suns almost never set, a fledgling killer joins a school of assassins seeking vengeance against the powers who destroyed her family. Daughter of an executed traitor, Mia Corvere is barely able to escape her father's failed rebellion with her life. Alone and friendless, she hides in a city built from the bones of a dead god, hunted by the Senate and her father's former comrades. But her gift for speaking with the shadows leads her to the door of a retired killer and a future she never imagined. Now Mia is apprenticed to the deadliest flock of assassins in the entire Republic, the Red Church. If she bests her fellow students in contests of steel, poison, and the subtle arts, she'll be inducted among the blades of the Lady of the Blessed Murder, and one step closer to the vengeance she desires. But a killer is loose within the church's halls. The bloody secrets of Mia's past return to haunt her, and a plot to bring down the entire congregation is unfolding in the shadows she so loves. Will she even survive to initiation, let alone long enough to have her revenge? Well, guys, that takes us into 2016. This is the Nevernight Chronicle by Jay Kristoff. Again, like usual, guys, we're going to talk about what makes it good or bad. I like to begin with the good here, guys, and good thing, because there's a lot of it here. I got to say, Mia Corvere is one of the best female protagonists I have ever read. And I think that's because a lot of modern fantasy, this is going to seem kind of hot takey, guys. I'm going to let you know up front. A lot of modern fantasy I've read, a lot of the modern authors like to take shortcuts. You ever heard of Rey from Star Wars? Yeah, a lot of it is that. They don't feel like they have to work for anything. They never struggle for anything. And therefore, as the reader, it's hard for you to really connect with that character because they don't have to work for anything. They don't struggle. They don't have any conflict. They don't have any problems at all. So it's like, why am I rooting for this character? They're always going to win. With Mia, I feel like she messes up. She makes mistakes. She takes L's every once in a while. But you know what? When she overcomes those odds, it makes it so much more fulfilling to the reader. It feels so good to see her overcome something that you thought she might not. And I think that's what's, it's just, I think a lot of modern fantasy has been missing this. And I think that this is done in a way that is believable. It is quite endears the character to you. And yeah, she is really what I think the prototype for a strong female lead in a fantasy series should be, because she's very layered, she's very relatable, you can sympathize with her, you can have times where you're like, oh my god, I want to strangle you, and you can have those times where you're like, I don't think she's going to do this one, and then when she does, it feels so good. So that's something that I feel like I've been missing a lot with a lot of female protagonists. I think the closest was Vivenna from Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson that I kind of got like this, but I think that Mia kind of took that to a higher level. This is exactly what I've been looking for. Imagine then from the Mistborn series. But imagine her way more brutal and way more vicious. I kind of look at it like that because I love the Mistborn series. I'm not going to pretend, but I'm not going to sit here and say this series is anything close to Mistborn, except that I would say that they have like. If you had a much more cruel and punishing world than Mistborn was, I think Mia could kind of be the result of that. So that's a weird comparison I didn't really expect to make. But what I said with Mia, that everything feels earned. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels like we got to do it just because. It feels like, okay, this character went through those trials and tribulations and got there. So when she overcomes it, guys, it feels so good. Now, I also got to give more credit to his tertiary characters. Now, these are characters that, you have your main supporting cast. They're all very good, as you would expect an author like this to have, good characters. But the tertiary characters in here, the characters that are just off in the background, I have to give him so much credit for this because he finds a way to make you care about all of them. There's never one time where you're like, who the hell is this person when they show up in book 3? It never happens because you know each one of them because he will give each of them their moment. And I think this is very important. He gives them their moment and he gives them a little bit of a backstory each time. It's something he did really, really well in Empire of the Vampire. And I can see he does it here with an even bigger cast in that book. And he does it over all 3 volumes. Every single side character, you know what their ordeal is. You know some of their background. You know why they are here. You know why they have the opinions they do. And that's very, very talented. As someone as a character first guy, that is something I could not get enough of. And it made me relate to those characters. So when bad things happen to them and he starts killing them off, you give a damn. And guys, yeah, he does start killing them off. I said it when I said Empire of the Vampire. He is not afraid to go vicious on his characters. It's never quite lambs to the slaughter, but there are times where you're like, geez, man, I mean, who hurt you? It does kind of feel like that at some points because you care about these characters. You do give a damn when they die, and it is always impactful. And that's something that tells me again that he's writing some good characters because it's a character that you would have thought when it first showed up, you're like, oh man, not more new characters. And then, after, 3 or 4 chapters they get killed, you're like, whatever. No, with this, it matters. It matters when these characters go bye-bye. And again, that's just a masterclass at writing characters, I think. Another thing I really love about this is I feel like each book is kind of its own thing. So that description that I kind of read at the beginning, that really is just for Nevernight. Yeah, that really is just kind of what Nevernight's like. But the thing is, guys, I don't want you thinking, because I hear a lot of people be like, oh, yeah, it's like Harry Potter, it's like a magic. So it's not. It's not anything like Harry Potter at all, guys. I don't know where that's come from. It seems like anytime any students go to a school now, no matter if it's for magic, if it's for potions, if it's for whatever, this is an assassin's school. Everybody's got to compare it to Harry Potter. And I understand, guys, it's a very influential series. That's the one that a lot of people that read modern fantasy now kind of cut their teeth on, so I get it. Book 1 is the only one that's like that. This is the assassination school kind of plot line. God's Grave is very much your Spartacus Blood and Sand or your Gladiator storyline. And then you got Dark Dawn, which is basically an amalgamation of all 3 of these books and all of these multiple character arcs, all these characters that you never thought were going to cross paths in a way that made sense. And when they happen in the most rewarding way possible. So I love that all 3 books feel different. It doesn't feel like he's like, I was liking this movie this week, so I went ahead and kind of piggybacked off that. I don't think it feels like that. It's just that each book does still just very much feel very distinct on its own right. And I think that's something that's very important when you're writing a trilogy, instead of making it just feel like a lot of trilogies I read, where it's like, okay, that was one long story that you cut into 3 volumes. This does feel very much like 3 different stories. They are a continuation, obviously, of each one, and you do get a lot of connections between them, but each one has a different feel, and I think that's very important. Okay, guys, got to talk about the action here. It is violent. It is cinematic. It is fast-paced. It is in your face. It is so good, guys. I never think that there's one time in this book where there's an action scene going where I'm like, checking my watch or thinking I got to open up my phone and check my email. This is some really, really good stuff here. And again, I knew this with Empire of the Vampire, and I can see that while I do think that reading it backwards like this, I do think that he is a better writer in Empire of the Vampire than in this one, but definitely not in the action. The action is top notch here. I'm never bored. I'm always intrigued on what's going on. There's some really, really great ones in God's Grave. If I was ranking these guys, I'd go God's Grave number 1, Nevernight number 2, and Dark Dawn number 3, but again, that's just because something has to finish at the bottom, right? I think all 3 of these books are great, and you're not ever going to get to a point where you're like, oh man, I missed the way that things were going in this book. I think it continues to be great that way, but the good part is because of the action. The action is really, really well done. Now, this isn't just like an action-heavy series, and it does have a lot of action in it, but it is still very much, I think, a character journey, and it's about the revenge arc as a whole, which is something that, being a big fan of the Count of Monte Cristo, I'm always here for a good revenge tale. It never will get old to me. I got to talk about the language in here because you guys know I am 12 and I love to giggle at bad language in books and stuff like that. Yes, this has a lot of the same kind of bad language that Empire of the Vampire has. It doesn't quite have as good of combinations and modifiers as he used in that book, but they are here. They are present. There are some that will make you laugh. And yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, like I am, you'll enjoy it. If bad language bothers you, violence bothers you, lots of sex bothers you, maybe not so much, but we'll get into that here in a minute. But I love that he uses themes of family and grief and loss and learning to cope with these things through the series. Family is very, very prevalent throughout the whole thing. And it's not in a Hallmark card kind of way, but the way it's done is actually impactful and meaningful, and I appreciated it quite a bit. Made a lot of the characters matter in ways that you wouldn't expect. Like you know about this one character, why he's here, and he has a kid, but this kid died, and you just things like that. Just everyone dealing with loss and separation from family. I think that's something that's very, very endearing to the characters, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I'm glad that he really made that the focus of this story. I got to talk about Kristoff's meta way of using some self-deprecating humor on himself, as we're going to talk about the not so good stuff here in a minute. And I love that you can tell that he listened to his criticisms over the first two books, because in book 3 he does find ways to make fun of himself, and it's never in a way that takes you out of the story. It's very well done the way he does it. And guys, I'll tell you, Brent Weeks, this is how you do a twist in a story without ruining your story. There are some things that he kind of throws out in here. They're like, whoa, that was nothing I ever would have expected, but it never is story breaking. I love the way he does it. And again, the self-deprecating humor is really good. There was a conversation between a couple of characters about basically nicknames for genitalia that had me laughing out loud at my office at work. So, there we go. Okay, let's kind of talk about maybe the not so good stuff. Now, look, guys, this might not be stuff that bothered me as much as it might bother others, but it is criticism that I know you might be interested in if you are on the fence about reading this series. I'm going to tell you now. If I think that these things will bother you, might not be the series for you. The footnotes seem to be a very big sticking point for a lot of people. For me, I always found it cool because it felt like the narrator was breaking the fourth wall to talk to the reader. It also was a good way of keeping these books from going up to about 700 pages with all of the world building that he would put into it. If you wanted to know more about the history, you could. Here's the thing, though. I feel like you could skip them. Wouldn't make a ton of difference. There are some things that's like, oh, that makes sense in book 3 about the footnotes. But yeah, I'll understand there are some points where you'll be like, oh, I don't want to read this. Some of these footnotes go like 2 pages. Do I really want to do this? You don't have to, guys. It doesn't break the story for me personally. But I can see why it bothers some people. They didn't really find them funny at all. I mean, I think it's funny that even one part he says, why are you reading this when the action is happening in the story right now? So again, I feel like it is very much the narrator talking to you, and they made me laugh. So they didn't bother me very much. But again, I know that has been a huge, huge complaint among a lot of people, and it's something that Kristoff does address in book 3. The big one, guys, is the big one for me. The romances in this book did not really land for me. Now, I'm not going to lie, guys. I have gone on the record multiple times saying I hate a love triangle because I think it is so lazy and so annoying. This gets right there, but doesn't quite get to those points of bother me like that. My problem more with this is that I never buy the romances. It seems like the people that love Mia love her way more than she loves them. It seems like they're all about Mia. That's it. And she's just kind of like, I want to get my revenge. I never really buy it. So when Kristoff does try to lean in heavy about how, oh no, Mia loves them back, I'm like, I'm not getting that at all from her attitude, So that's might be a thing for me. And the big relationship in this book, absolutely hated it. And I know that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Mike, you just don't like, same-sex relationships. You can miss me with that because that's not true at all. Go listen to my Empire of the Vampire review. The same-sex couple in that book, one of my favorite parts of the whole story. So yeah, that's not true at all. My problem with that is I felt like the character that he was getting involved here was someone he wanted to do a redemption arc with. And then you do the romance. I feel like you forgot to do the redemption arc because I was like, okay, no, that character did a lot of bad things And now I'm just supposed to be like, okay, I like them because Mia likes them. I just never really got it. So that relationship just never really clicked for me at all. In fact, that character never really clicked for me at all. So I'm not against romance, guys. I mean, I love me some good romantic books. I'm not going to lie. But this one didn't hit. Didn't hit at all. And I think it was more because it seemed one-sided on much of it, or the author telling me, yes, they're in love, but I saw no proof of it, So maybe that was just me. But I will say, guys, the sex scenes, well written. Very well written. Again, what I said in Empire of the Vampire was like, kind of having like, that a couple times. This is even more. I mean, this is the type where like I was reading in my office and I'm like looking around the office to make sure nobody can see, me blushing a little bit. He's very good at this. He's very, very good at it. The guy could be an erotica writer if he wanted to, I think. He's that good at it. So I would never say that, but I know that there are a lot of people who have problems with, teenage kids having sex this good. The way I looked at it was kind of like a, unreliable narrator. When you're a teenager, yeah, you're really bad at it, but you think that you're really good, right? Maybe kind of looking at it like that. There are sometimes it might seem a little excessive. I get that. He's just not the type of author that's ever going to, fade to black or turn the camera away when things are getting, kind of steamy. So they're very well written, but they might not be for everyone, and I do know that has bothered some people. They feel like this is just a smut book. Look, it's smut, but there's so much more to these books. Let's go ahead and get into why I think that you guys should read it. I think this series has been wholly misrepresented on BookTube. There's a lot of channels bigger than mine that have really, really just railed on the series. And it's got to a point where there are some channels like that where people take their word for gospel. I always encourage my viewers, this is what I think, but I want you to read it yourself and decide. There are others who say, okay, no, whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to do it. They tell me to read it, I'm going to read it. Tell me not to read it, I'm going to skip it. I feel like this one's kind of got the same fate as like Hanius, where it feels like it got kind of torpedoed on BookTube, and now people won't give it a try. I'm here to tell you guys, it's very good. I think that, I can see some of those criticisms, but not hardly any of them at all. I see some of them, but never in a way that some of those other booktubers have said about the series. I don't get it. I really don't. I try to be objective about these things, be like, I can see where they're coming from. I can't on this one. Oh, he writes too many similes, too many metaphors. A lot of authors do. Is he the best writer in the world? Probably not. His prose isn't going to knock you out, but it isn't this. This isn't Twilight or something, guys. This is very well written, and like I said, the characters are very, very good, and I think the overall plot is a pretty good one. Yeah, it kind of derailed for me a little bit in book 3, but it still kept that central focus that I wanted, so it never really bothered me. But yeah, I think that any time that you have a series with young protagonists, everyone always kind of wants to throw it under that YA umbrella, especially publishers. Like, oh, you have a teenage female protagonist. They start thinking about all the YA dollars they can get. This series is not young adult, guys. This series is extremely adult. Extremely. Think of it kind of like Red Rising, where I said Red Rising gets the reputation for being YA because of its covers. And I said, I think that it's more of a story that has, a story for adults that has young kids as protagonists, I don't think that age is what makes something YA. I look at the content. Does this have wish fulfillment? No. Does this have a love triangle? Not exactly. Does this have, just completely unearned stuff from a protagonist? No, absolutely not. It's earned all the way. So it doesn't have any of those YA tropes that I can't stand. So I can't really put it under that. And again, guys, you have some of the most graphic sex and violence scenes that I've seen in a series. So I definitely can't call this series young adult. I think that anyone over the high school age is probably the target audience here, and I think they'll enjoy it. But I'll say that look, this series is more vulgar than Red Rising, obviously, because Red Rising, Pierce Brown does kind of fade to black when it's the sex scenes, but he'll show you the violence and he'll use the bad language and stuff like that. But this series is kind of somewhere in between like a First Law and a Red Rising, like somewhere right in there. In that, yes, it does have young protagonists, but it also has a lot of grimdark themes to it. But I definitely wouldn't call this a grimdark book, although I would say there is no characters on here where you're just like, oh yeah, they're completely great, So if your morally gray characters are your jam, I think this is going to be it. But look, guys, high adrenaline, low commitment read. I read this whole thing in under 3 weeks, and I think you could do the same. So you can knock these out in a month. It isn't really going to, dominate your life very much. You can read at your own leisure, and you can do it rather quickly. I think that they are very much page turners in a way that you will enjoy. Now, final thoughts here, guys. I think the dumbest decision reading decision. I've done other dumb things. The dumbest reading decision I've made since starting this channel is waiting this long to try Jay Kristoff, because he's 4 for 4 for me now. I think that anything adult fantasy, or if he does adult science fiction that he writes going forward, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to give it a chance. I think that he's got my trust now at this point, that I like the way that he writes, and I definitely like his dialogue, and his character work is just superb. So that's very easy to get me on board with his stuff. But this is a series I think is going to even go better for me over time, and if I'm looking back at it now, this is the series that I wanted Poppy War to be. Now, there isn't a real comparison here between this and Poppy War. It's the one I kept coming back to, because I felt like this was, what I wanted Ren to be the whole time I was reading Poppy War, is what Mia actually was. So I felt like that series could have been fixed, if it was more like Mia. But most series like this, I expect Mia to go more like Ren did, and it doesn't. So I bucks that trend, and I really did appreciate that. And like I said, guys, I think this should be the blueprint for all modern fantasy authors on how to write your protagonist, because he does it just perfect. It's the best way to write a protagonist, I think, a young protagonist in a series like this. Because you feel like you're rooting for them. You feel like you're on their side. You feel their defeats. You cheer for their victories. It makes it all worth it. I say forget the naysayers, guys. Pick this up and decide for yourself. It's going to be very divided, but I think, you're going to like it if you give it a shot. Now, look, it's not going to be a guarantee for everyone here. I'm not doing a why you should read, because I don't think this series is going to please everyone. I will say on my Discord, it was kind of divided. Most liked it. I'd say probably about 7 or 8 out of 10 that were reading it liked it. There are a few that dropped out in book one. It just wasn't for them. They felt like it was the same conversations over and over. Okay, that's cool. Definitely not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to work for everyone, but for me, it was exactly what I was looking for. It made me very, very happy. And I'm glad I decided to give this author a try, because I'm just excited for what he brings in the future. Can't wait for the Vampire sequel. So guys, have you read the Nevernight Trilogy? What did you think? Drop in the comments and let me know, and I will talk to you there.